I believe, for example, that full visibility across the supply chain is possible, but we are not there yet. But this is not a technical problem. This is just because people are still not willing to share the data. And we have seen also major progress, from my perspective, in the Uberization or digitalization of the entire trucking industry. So we see platforms now really working. We see platforms digitizing almost everything.
This is the Art of Freight podcast. So welcome to the Art of Freight, a new podcast hosted by myself, Gregor Gowans, and produced by the team at Trans.eu. Now, why are we doing this podcast? Well, first and foremost, we think there's room to have a platform to discuss the big challenges and key developments in the freight sector, predominantly from a European, but also from a global perspective. There are also still so many stories to be told in the world of freight, and we want this podcast to be where you hear them. The logistics industry is renowned for its unique ability to adapt to ever-moving obstacles, and we want to speak to a wide variety of people. That means company directors, it means C-level managers, it means independent experts, both from different countries and different companies, large and small. We're all part of this logistics ecosystem, and we want to speak to everyone. So follow us on our channels on LinkedIn and YouTube and on all the platforms where you get your podcasts. And if you want to take part, just drop us a mail. Now, as you have seen in the introduction of this video, our very first special guest on the show is none other than Wolfgang Lehmacher, a recognized independent expert in the field of logistics and supply chain. Now, Wolfgang's global experience and influence extends to some of the most prominent advisory boards in logistics and supply chain management, including the Logistics and Supply Chain Management Society in Singapore and the European Freight and Logistics Leaders Forum in Brussels. He's also an advisor to RISE in Sweden and Global in San Francisco, and a founding member of the Logistikweisen, the German Federal Ministry's Logistics Expert Committee. Okay, Wolfgang, pleasure to have you on the show. Let's get stuck into today's topic, if I may, which is road transport digitalisation. So where do you think are the areas where digitalisation in road transport has come on leaps and bounds, has progressed, and which areas do you feel are untapped and there's still a lot to do?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think that's what a lot of people thinking about. In fact, we have seen major developments in software. We have seen new code, telematic system, GPS, mobile phones. And I think that we have a broad range of improvements in the area of visibility, driver behavior monitoring, communication safety, back office processes, back office automation, and greenhouse gas emissions calculations. I believe, for example, that full visibility across the supply chain is possible, but we are not there yet. But this is not a technical problem. This is just because people are still not willing to share the data. And we have seen also major progress, from my perspective, in the Uberization or digitalization of the entire trucking industry. So we see platforms now really working. We see platforms digitizing almost everything except the ad hoc requests and some emergencies. I believe that the digital dispatcher is already a reality.
So given the way which, let's say, conventional or legacy forwarders are now investing in digital technologies, is the line between a traditional or so-called digital forwarder being blurred? Can we still draw a line between the two?
Of course we can draw a line. I personally don't use the term digital forwarder or digital carrier, or I have stopped using it, because I believe it is the distinction between conventional actors and digital first actors. And this also draws the line or the demarcation line Because when we think about digital-first carriers or forwarders, they think first technology. They think, how can technology optimize existing processes? Whereas the conventional players, they think about people and their operating model and say, okay, well, how can I make the life of my people easier? How can I potentially replace people? But I think it's the starting point where there is the difference. And that also drives very different design approaches. First, the digital-first operators, what they do, they build the ideal engine and what I believe reach to a stage where they can automate 70, 80% of the processes. And then the rest is left to the humans, which is also good because this is the interesting stuff.
Let's just expand on that if we can. What processes have been and are being digitized, and which will always require human input?
Yeah, when you go through the process, you have the list of carriers that can be put on the system. You can categorize these carriers so you know where they bring loads to, where they pick loads up, what they like to do and what they don't like to do. Then you have the shippers and the whole ordering of capacity. Also that can be automated. There is no problem in pushing data from one system to another. And if the two sides are well organized in the system, then the system picks the right carrier for the right load. So that's, in fact, the digital dispatcher, what I have spoken about before. And then the rest is mechanics. So you can, through advanced visibility tools, you can follow the truck, you can see when the load is delivered, you get automatically the proof of delivery, reports are generated, invoices are generated, payments are arranged. So this can all be automated and digitized. What cannot be digitized is if a truck breaks down, then the platform cannot fix this. Then you need the dispatcher to find an alternative solution, but he can also use the platform to do so. So every time we have an exception, every time we have an emergency, then humans have to be there and know what to do.
Now, one area that can be quite arduous and labor intensive is the work involved in assigning freight via a myriad of communication methods. It might be email, telephone, instant messenger. How difficult a process is this to optimize?
Now, I haven't built the platform myself, so I don't know how challenging this is, but I have worked with companies that have done it. So I take the reality which already exists today and say it can't be that difficult. It is working already. And there can be very light models. I work with another TMS that is super light, super agile, and can adjust to whatever situation, operational reality is there. So I think the technology is there. It is our mindset. It is the willingness to move our business from one model to the other. And this is also where the challenge lies.
Another important aspect of freight assignment is, of course, negotiation. So to what extent do you feel we're going to see AI negotiating with AI, let's say in comparison to negotiations between human parties?
I think we will see machines negotiating with machines. Does that need to be AI? I'm not totally convinced. AI makes it probably better. But if you take the current platforms in place, there is a negotiation going on. And this negotiation is based on information. So let's take a platform that takes on a request for capacity. So when the requests come in, then the platform, based on usually historic information, but also situational awareness, calculates a price. And this price can be then put to the one who looks for capacity. And with a reduction, it can be offered to a number of carriers. And the one who finds this an attractive price will take it. And if nobody takes it, the system can even adjust it. So I believe this is already happening. That's not something of the future. This is the reality today in those worlds where digital platforms are already in place.
Now, one area that we said that we would discuss, where I think progress is still there to be made, is the electronic documentation, namely the electronic bill of lading, which, as I understand, there are different levels of adoption depending on the mode of transport. How is that developing at this moment in time, and what are the reasons as to why the process might not be as fast as some would want?
That's a longer story. So the digitalization of freight documents started already 25 years ago. In 1999, there was the creation of Bolero to create, in fact, the electronic bill of lading. But it took till 2021 that MSC, Hapag-Lloyd, and one, shortly one after the other, introduced their electronic bill of lading in the operation. So it's there, it's happening. In the air freight market, it came a little bit later. The IATA's e-freight initiative was launched in 2005, but they all went much faster. And today, 85% of all air cargo transport is using electronic airway bills, and they are moving probably very quickly towards 100%, which is targeted for 2026. In the road freight area, we have the additional protocol concerning the ECMR, and this was added to the convention in 2008, and now 33 countries have ratified the ECMR. So we see across all modes that things are happening. What is the challenge is the fragmented regulatory landscape, which makes it hard. For example, the electronic bill of lading is a negotiable instrument, which makes it even more complicated. And to make it happen, we need that across all jurisdictions, such a document is accepted, and that the court accept this document. So that's a major challenge, but we will get there. Then there is the decades-old legacy IT systems challenge, where we have systems in place that cannot handle a massive amount of digital documents, has difficulties to scale. And then there are interoperability challenges. So systems are also in the way, but with the quick, swift development of technology, I don't see an issue there neither. And we will see the necessary protocols coming up to bridge the gaps between different systems and different speeds of development. For me, the whole digitalization, including the digitalization of documents, is first of all a mindset and willingness challenge. And the more stakeholders are involved, the more difficult it gets. So if I have my own world and my own platform, I think it's easier compared to when I have to deal with 190 governments in the world.
Are there any regions where you think that it might be slower because of all of these different national governments and their agendas and the process of putting through legislation and all of that kind of thing? One would imagine there could be some areas where this would take some time.
That's a good question. The 33 countries which I mentioned that have rectified their electronic CMR are European countries. So in road, I think Europe is a good platform to get things moving. The US usually is at the forefront of digitalization, and that's probably one of the easier places. So are countries like Japan, Korea, China, not to forget. I believe that we can assume that the advanced and developed world is faster in digitalization. But on the other hand, we should not forget that in the developing world, people are also highly creative and very often leapfrog or find shortcuts. It's very difficult to say who are the laggards. I recently looked into India, and it's also amazing what is going on there. In particular, when we look at the government and their efforts of digitalization. I think the big countries, the developed countries, are at the forefront, and the smaller countries and the less developed world will have a bit of a harder time to get the job done.
Okay, let's move things on to another topic that we're going to be discussing today, which is visibility. Earlier on in the show, you touched on full visibility. Let's just focus on that for a minute. I think it would be interesting to define what we mean first and foremost by full visibility.
For me, the question is visibility on what? If you are a shipper that has 25,000 containers per year, you don't want to have visibility on every shipment. You wish to have visibility when things go wrong. And I think that's what everybody is looking for, to get over the challenge that you have a shipment that doesn't arrive and nobody can tell you why and where it is. And even once it has arrived, it is often very hard to know what really happened. So that's the first question. So what do we really want to see when we talk about visibility? I believe we want to see when things are not going the way planned. Then you can break this down a little bit further, because what is happening, we have an original transport plan, but often that transport plan changes a few times during a transport. So people want to know that, because that helps to understand whether somebody has to intervene or not. And I think that would already be fantastic if every update in a transport plan would be made visible. And everybody in the chain has a plan. So when you are the shipper, you have a plan. But you work with the forwarder has a plan. The forwarder works with the carrier has a plan. That means also that the carrier, the forwarder, that both have to share the data with the shipper so that the shipper has the visibility. So it's an easy question and a complex answer.
You stressed how important data sharing is when it comes to visibility. So I suppose the question is, how do we encourage or perhaps even force key stakeholders in the industry to share that data?
I first would like to say a little bit about the situation we are facing. I'm the co-editor of the Green Freight Report 2024, and what that report tells us is that 50% of the carrier, and we're talking here about road freight, are not willing to share data for CO2 emission calculations. That means half of the data is not shared. And of course, that is a challenge for visibility. And in North America, even 74% of all carriers do not want to share the data. So that's the situation we are in. When we are talking about or want to know what we could do to make the situation better, I believe this is about incentives, customer pull, and regulatory pressure. When we look at the report again, 44% of the responding shippers report that they evaluate the environmental performance of all road freight transport providers by using compliance schemes. That means they need data. Right? And 34% of shippers report that they use CO2 data in tenders for freight transport. So that is for me the customer pull. Customers want data. So there is a certain expiry date to the non-willingness of sharing data. And then there is the business opportunity. There is still a quarter of all carriers that see in environmental sustainability a significant business opportunity. So all that see an opportunity do not even need the pool. They will do it. They will generate data to capture the opportunity. So that's an incentive. And then we have the regulatory side. And I could imagine that one day regulators will make it mandatory to share certain data, thinking about sustainability data, to better calculate emissions and reduce them. So these are, for me, the main drivers to improve the situation.
On the subject of visibility, there is a bit of discussion right now as to what extent existing tools can provide us with the data that we need to make accurate calculations. So with that in mind, how can we leverage the technology that we have right now to achieve more accurate emission calculations?
There's a very easy way to do this when we speak about road freight. There are telematic systems, and the telematic systems provide the information. I think it's not complex. It is using what we have, and what we have is technology, but also proven and recognized methodologies. A lot of people use spreadsheets and their own methodologies to calculate emissions. I think that's a total no-go for me, because the delta between calculation on secondary data and primary data coming out of telematic systems, for example, the delta can be 70%. And if I have a possible variance of 70%, then my data is useless. So I think it's not difficult. It's a question of technology, using existing methodology to make it work. And coming back to the incentives, 62% of the shippers are using primary data from carriers to calculate emissions. So we are also, I think, on a good track. And there is clearly an indication that sustainability data will be more and more important for the shippers.
To what extent do you feel that the companies are using the data at their disposal to genuinely make sustainability gains? I'm curious as to your opinion, because there are some skeptics out there that make the argument that the data can simply be construed to give these companies the results that they're looking for.
I don't think that there's any empirical data on this topic. For me, the best way, and I'm advocating this quite a while, the best way to get things moving is through incentives, and that can also be a tax on carbon. So if my emissions suddenly cost me money, then I will try to reduce them. That's for me the simple thought to this. But if we think about what companies are using technology and data, I believe the better companies do. The more I know about my business, the better I can manage it. The more data I have, the better I can serve my customers, correspond to the well-being of my drivers, can expand the lifeline of my assets. I believe it's a no-brainer. And sometimes I wonder, what are we doing that we are not using what the technology offers to us to manage our fleets, to manage our loads, to manage our emissions?
When we think about supply chain visibility technology and the developments that we expect to see in the future, what will those allow us to do significantly better than what we're doing now?
As I explained before, I believe that almost everything can be automated, and visibility data is the ingredient we need to automate. Second is that costs can only be managed if I understand the underlying processes and can benchmark my processes. Again, data is critical. Sustainability, we have spoken about it, is not manageable. Emission reduction is not manageable if we don't have data. So I believe it's a question of good management, and better management will lead to lower cost, higher productivity, less trouble, more revenue. So for me, that's what you get out of it.
These are all positives from an efficiency point of view, but one would also argue that there will be a less of a labour force as a result of these changes. So which areas do you think will be impacted the most and we'll see smaller workforces in the future?
In general, all the cumbersome routine jobs will be automated sooner or later. We have seen this over the last at least 100 years. And I nevertheless don't think that we have that much of a, let's say, labor disbursement issue at the end. Let's think about planes. Planes are probably the most advanced, among the most advanced technological machines. And we still have pilots on these planes. There are still people thinking that that's maybe not necessary, but so far it didn't happen. If we think about stock taking in warehouses, in many warehouses, you still have ladders and people climbing on racks to count screws, right? Is that a good use of labor? And what about the accidents? So now we have drones that can do the job. We have people carrying heavy stuff from one manufacturing line or assembly line to another. That can be done by AMRs. And I think it's better that AMRs do that. So for me, automation is a very good thing for everyone at the end of the day. Of course, we have all to go with the flow, and there is a need for different skills, different profiles in the industry, but there was always an industry where you need more manual and more basic labor. How the distribution of wealth is managed, and that's a totally different topic, and probably politicians should put this on their agenda if it's not already there.
I think we'll leave that discussion for the politicians, but we can conclude that automation is going to change things clearly. And on that note, it's time to end. So thanks for coming on the show, Wolfgang. It's been a pleasure having you.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening or watching. Follow our socials to catch every episode.